Nobody expected what happened next. The talk show host's words echoed through the studio, drawing gasps and nervous laughter from the audience. But as the cameras zoomed in on Melania Trump, her poised yet steely gaze hinted that this moment was far from over. What she said next would leave everyone speechless. Bright studio lights illuminated the sleek, modern set of The Tyler Reed Show, a popular late-night talk show known for its biting humor and unfiltered political commentary. The audience buzzed with anticipation, their faces reflecting a mix of curiosity and excitement as they awaited the next moment of controversy that Reed had become infamous for delivering. Seated at the interview table was Melania Trump, her composed posture and elegant ivory dress, a stark contrast to the charged atmosphere around her. Despite the cameras, the audience, and the host's reputation for provocative remarks, her expression remained poised, her eyes focused calmly on Reed as he leaned forward with a grin that hinted at mischief. "So, Melania," Reed began, his tone light yet carrying an undercurrent of mockery, "it's not every day we get to chat with someone who's been First Lady, fashion icon, and, how should I put this, one of the most talked about women in America." A ripple of laughter moved through the audience, though a few faces tightened in anticipation of what was coming next. Melania offered a polite smile, her hands resting lightly in her lap. "Thank you, Tyler. I'm happy to be here." Reed tilted his head slightly as if sizing her up. "You know, I have to ask," he continued, his voice taking on a more pointed edge. "There are a lot of people out there who wonder, what's it really like being married to Donald Trump? I mean, between the wealth, the fame, the unique personality, some might say you hit the jackpot." Laughter rippled through the crowd, louder this time. Melania's smile didn't falter, but a subtle tension flickered in her gaze. Reed leaned back in his chair, gesturing broadly as if addressing the entire room. "I mean, let's be honest here," he said, his grin widening. "There's been plenty of speculation over the years. Some folks even call you a gold digger." The laughter that followed was more hesitant, some in the audience unsure if they should laugh at such a direct jab. But Reed pressed on, his eyes gleaming with the thrill of pushing boundaries. "Come on, Melania," he added with a chuckle. "You can't tell me you've never heard that one before. I mean, a former supermodel marrying a billionaire businessman. People are bound to talk, right?" The studio fell into an uneasy silence, broken only by a few nervous chuckles scattered among the audience. All eyes turned to Melania, waiting to see how she would respond. For a moment, she said nothing, her expression unreadable beneath the poised mask she had perfected over years in the public eye. But then slowly she leaned forward, her gaze locking onto Reed's with a calm intensity that instantly shifted the dynamic of the room. "I have heard it before," she said, her voice clear and steady, carrying just enough weight to cut through the lingering echoes of laughter. "People love to judge what they don't understand. It's easier to assume than to ask." Reed's grin faltered slightly, but he recovered quickly. "So, you're saying there's no truth to it?" Melania's eyes narrowed just slightly, not with anger, but with the sharp focus of someone who had grown accustomed to defending herself without raising her voice. "What I'm saying," she replied, "is that my marriage is not for anyone else to define. People see what they want to see. Some see love, others see money. But what they don't see is the life we've built, the challenges we've faced, the moments that have shaped us. They see a headline, not a story." The audience had grown noticeably quieter now, the energy in the room shifting as Melania's words settled into the air like a challenge that couldn't be ignored. Reed, however, wasn't ready to back down. Leaning forward once more, he tapped the edge of his cue cards against the table. "Fair enough," he said, his smile tightening. "But come on, marrying one of the richest men in America does come with some perks, right? Private jets, luxury homes, a life most people can only dream of. You can't blame people for wondering if love had a financial incentive." This time the laughter was more pronounced, a few audience members even clapping as Reed leaned back, clearly pleased with himself. But Melania didn't flinch. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, her gaze steady and unyielding. "Tell me, Mr. Reed," she said, her voice still calm but carrying an unmistakable edge. "Do you measure all relationships by what's in a person's bank account? Or is it just easier to believe that a woman can't choose a man for who he is rather than what he has. The laughter died instantly. Reed's smile faltered, the shift in the room palpable as Melania's words seemed to strip away the humor he had tried to cloak his remarks in. I, he began, but Melania didn't give him the chance to recover. I understand why people judge, she continued, because it's easier to label someone than to understand their story. But let me be clear, I didn't marry Donald for his money. I married him because I saw the man behind the headlines, the man who believes in his vision, who works harder than anyone I've ever met, and who stood by me through challenges most people will never face. Love isn't about what someone can give you. It's about what you build together. Her voice didn't rise, but the weight behind her words seemed to fill the entire studio, pressing against the air with a force that no one could ignore. And if people want to call me a gold digger, she added, her gaze sweeping briefly over the audience before returning to Reed, that says more about their assumptions than it does about my choices. A ripple of applause broke the silence, hesitant at first, then growing louder as more audience members joined in. Reed shifted in his seat, clearly thrown off balance by the unexpected turn of the conversation. Well, he said, forcing a laugh that sounded hollow now, I guess that's one way to put it. Melania's smile returned, though this time there was a hint of steel beneath its elegance. It's the truth, she replied simply. The applause grew louder, and for the first time that night, Reed seemed at a loss for words. The camera panned across the audience, capturing the mix of admiration, surprise, and, in some cases, genuine reflection written across their faces. What had started as a joke at Melania's expense had become something else entirely. A reminder that even the most public figures are more than the labels the world tries to place on them. And as the applause continued, Melania sat back in her chair, her posture as poised as ever, but her eyes holding a quiet strength that needed no further defense. Because tonight, she hadn't just silenced the room, she had redefined the narrative. The applause still echoed through the studio, a sound that seemed to linger longer than anyone had anticipated. Melania Trump remained seated, her posture poised but her gaze unwavering, as if she knew the moment was hers and had no intention of relinquishing it. Across from her, Tyler Reed shifted slightly in his seat, his confident smirk now tempered with something closer to uncertainty. The cameras rolled on, capturing every second of the charged silence that had fallen between them. Finally, Reed cleared his throat, tapping his cue cards against the table as if to regain his footing. Well, Melania, I've got to hand it to you. You've got away with word, he said, his tone light but carrying an undercurrent of tension. But you have to admit, it's easy to talk about love and character when you're living in a penthouse and flying on private jets. Not everyone has that luxury. A few chuckles rippled through the audience, though the laughter was more subdued this time. The energy in the room had shifted, and everyone could feel it. Melania tilted her head slightly, her eyes calm but sharp. You're right, she replied, her voice measured but firm. Not everyone has the same opportunities in life, but wealth doesn't shield you from challenges. It just changes the kind of challenges you face. And no amount of money can buy respect or integrity. Those are things you have to earn. The audience stirred, sensing the conversation was about to take another unexpected turn. Reed leaned forward slightly, his smile returning but with a hint of strain around the edges. Fair enough, he said. But come on, don't you think people have a right to question how much of your success comes from your own efforts and how much comes from being married to one of the richest men in the world? Melania's gaze didn't waver. Success isn't about where you start, she replied. It's about what you do with the opportunities you're given. Yes, my marriage opened doors, but it didn't define who I am. I built my career as a model before I ever met Donald. And as First Lady, I worked to make a difference, not because I had to, but because I believed I could help others. Her voice remained calm, but the conviction behind her words seemed to resonate through the air. The audience, sensing the weight of the moment, had fallen completely silent. Reed tapped his cards again, as if searching for the right words to regain control of the interview. But you have to admit, he pressed, that the public perception of you hasn't always been kind. People see the designer clothes, the luxury lifestyle, and they assume, well, you know what they assume. Melania's eyes narrowed slightly, though her smile remained. Yes, I know what they assume, she replied. But assumptions are easy. Understanding is harder. People see the surface and think they know the whole story, but they don't see the sacrifices, the late nights, the criticism that comes with every step you take in the public eye. They don't see the strength it takes to hold your head high when the world is trying to tear you down. Her voice, though still soft, carried a steel edge that seemed to cut through the air itself. And as for the designer clothes and the luxury lifestyle, she added, her smile faint but unyielding, those things don't define who I am. They're part of my life, not the measure of my worth. Real wealth isn't about what you have, it's about who you are when everything else is stripped away. A murmur of agreement rippled through the audience. Reed's smile faltered slightly, but he forced another laugh. Well, I have to say, I wasn't expecting a philosophy lesson tonight, he said, attempting to lighten the mood. Melania's gaze held his. Sometimes the truth is more powerful than a joke, Mr. Reed. The audience erupted into applause, louder and more sustained this time. Some members of the crowd even rose to their feet, their clapping echoing through the studio like a wave of validation that seemed to catch Reed off guard. For the first time that night, the host appeared genuinely uncertain. His usual arsenal of wit and sarcasm had met a wall of quiet strength that no punchline could break through. As the applause continued, Melania sat back slightly, her expression calm but resolute. She had said what needed to be said, and judging by the reaction of the crowd, her words had found their mark. Reed waited for the applause to die down before leaning forward once more, his tone noticeably more subdued. Well, Melania, I've got to say, you've given us all something to think about tonight. Maybe there's more to the story than the headlines let on. Melania inclined her head slightly, her smile faint but genuine. There always is, she replied. Reed glanced toward the camera, clearly eager to wrap up the interview before he lost any more ground. Ladies and gentlemen, Melania Trump, he announced, forcing a smile as the audience erupted into another round of applause. As the camera panned across the crowd, capturing the standing ovation that had now spread to nearly every corner of the studio, Melania stood and offered a graceful nod to the audience. Then, without another glance at Reed, she turned and walked off stage, her steps measured and unhurried, as if to underscore the fact that she had won this battle without ever raising her voice. And as the cameras faded to black, the only thing anyone could talk about was how Melania Trump had walked into the lion's den and walked out with her head held high, leaving the so-called king of late-night comedy with nothing but the echoes of her words and the realization that, for once, he had been the one left speechless. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that inspire and challenge us to grow. What would you have done if you were in her shoes? Let us know in the comments below.